The first thing I remember was not the explosion. It was the silence after it. For a few seconds, the control room stopped being a room full of men. It became a room full of numbers no one wanted to believe. A red light blinked on the panel, then another. Then a sound came from somewhere deep inside the building. Not a bang, not yet. A groan. Metal under stress. Water moving where water should not move. Someone said the readings were wrong. Someone else said the instruments were damaged. I looked at the needles. They were not explaining the room. They were accusing it. Outside the windows, it was still night. Pripyat was still asleep. Apartment lights were dark. Children were in beds. Kitchens were quiet. No one outside the plant knew that the air had begun to change. That was the worst part. The danger had no shape, no fire front, no smoke thick enough to point at, no enemy at the door. Only numbers, only alarms, only a taste in the mouth that did not belong there. I worked nights because nights were simpler. Fewer voices, fewer visitors, fewer men walking through corridors with papers in their hands and importance in their steps. At night, the plant had its own rhythm. Fans, relays, footsteps on tile, a door opening far away, the low, steady body of the reactor behind concrete and steel. We trusted that rhythm. You learn to trust machines when you spend enough hours beside them, not because they are kind, because they are consistent. A needle moves, a light changes, a pump starts, a valve answers. The machine speaks in signs, and we spend years learning the language. That night, the language began to break. At first, nothing looked like history. It looked like another shift, another test, another set of instructions passed down from men above us. The papers had been handled so many times their corners were soft. A turbine rundown test, a question of power, a question of timing, a question of whether a slowing turbine could still give enough electricity for a short time if other power failed. That is how it sounded in the paperwork. Dry, useful, controlled. Nothing in the paperwork had a smell. Nothing in the paperwork had heat. Nothing in the paperwork said that a city could sleep beside a mistake. I remember checking a gauge and hearing someone cough. I remember the fluorescent lights. I remember tea cooling in a glass. I remember a pencil rolling when someone set down a folder too hard. Small things stay sharp when larger things become impossible. The reactor was not supposed to be mysterious to us. It was large, dangerous, complicated, but not mysterious. There were procedures, there were limits, there were men who spoke as if numbers obeyed them personally, and there were men like me, standing in the middle, watching lights change, writing readings, waiting for orders to become safe simply because they were orders. Then the first signs came, not dramatic, not cinematic, a reading that did not settle. A number lower than expected, a response slower than it should have been. Men leaned closer to panels, voices tightened. Someone repeated a value. Someone asked for confirmation. Someone else said to continue. That word is very small. Continue. It can sound like discipline. It can sound like courage. Sometimes it is only fear wearing a uniform. I wrote down another number. My handwriting changed. I noticed it before I noticed my own breathing. The digits leaned too hard into the paper. A supervisor crossed behind me. He did not run. That mattered. In a plant, panic does not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrives as men walking quickly while pretending they are not. The test moved forward. The room grew smaller. Not physically. The walls stayed where they were, but the choices narrowed. Every alarm took away space. Every order took away time. Every uncertain number made the air heavier. The reactor did not feel like a machine now. It felt like a room behind a locked door, and something inside that room had begun to stand up. Then someone pressed the button. I will not pretend I understood everything in that second. No one inside my body did. I knew the procedure. I knew what that action was meant to do. I knew what a shutdown was supposed to mean. A shutting down should be an ending, a closing of force, a hand placed over a flame. But that night, the moment meant to stop the reactor became the moment before the world split open. The first explosion lifted the floor. Not enough to throw me across the room, enough to make my knees forget their job. Lights flashed, glass shook. A sound moved through the building like a giant striking it from below. Then came the second sound, deeper, wider, final. The ceiling dust fell. A panel went dark. A man shouted a name. Another shouted for readings. Someone cursed. Someone laughed once, a short broken sound that had no humor in it. Then the alarms arrived all at once. The room became sound. Sirens, buzzers, relays clicking, men speaking over men, phones ringing, static. Somewhere outside the control room, metal screamed. I remember gripping the edge of the desk. My hand was white. The pencil had fallen to the floor. I wanted to pick it up. That is how the mind protects itself. It chooses the smallest task. Pick up the pencil. Straighten the paper. Check the gauge again. Do not think about the sound. Do not think about the building. Do not think about the reactor. The first explanation was simple. A tank, a pipe, a fire, an electrical failure, something limited, something with edges. We needed it to have edges. If a pipe bursts, you isolate it. If a fire starts, you fight it. If a cable fails, you replace it. Men can face disaster if disaster has a shape, but the panels did not give us a shape. They gave us contradictions. Water where it should not be, pressure wrong, power gone, signals missing. A reactor that should have been shut down, and yet the room still felt alive with danger. Someone said the core was intact. He said it with the force of a man trying to make the sentence true. Another man repeated it. The core is intact. The core is intact. The words moved around the room like a prayer. I wanted to believe them. We all did. Because if the core was intact, then this was a terrible accident inside a plant. If the core was not intact, then the plant was no longer a plant. It was an open wound in the ground. No one said that. Not then. A man was sent to check, then another. They moved toward corridors that were no longer familiar. The lights were out in places. Steam drifted across the floor. Dust hung in the air. The building had changed shape in the dark. Doors that should have opened easily would not open. Windows were broken. Water ran underfoot. Somewhere, a fire glowed orange. I stayed near the control room, taking readings that no longer felt like readings. They felt like messages from a language already dead. A dosimeter was brought in. The needle climbed, then stopped at the top of its scale. A man shook it. He tapped the glass, as if the instrument were lazy, as if the truth could be knocked back into place. "It is faulty," someone said. Another dosimeter did the same. Then another. Faulty. 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 It is strange how many things must be called broken before a man admits that the world is broken instead. The corridors smelled wrong. Not smoke only, not steam only, something metallic, something sharp at the back of the mouth. I swallowed and tasted it again. I asked if the ventilation had failed. No one answered. A worker came back from outside. His face was pale under the dust. He said there were blocks on the ground. Black blocks. He said they looked like graphite. The room did not accept the word. Graphite belonged inside the reactor. Graphite did not lie on the ground outside like pieces of a smashed roof. Someone told him he was mistaken. Someone told him to go again. He did not move at first. Then he went. I watched his back disappear into the corridor, and I understood something I could not yet say. Denial is not always a lie. Sometimes denial is a machine still running after its power has been cut. It spins because it was spinning before. The orders continued. Find water, restore cooling, check the pumps, confirm the reactor, report the fire, call for help. Every instruction sounded reasonable alone. Together, they became impossible. The plant was asking us to repair a thing that was no longer there. Firefighters arrived. Brave men, ordinary men. Men who knew flames, hoses, ladders, roofs. They came to fight what they could see, and what they could see was fire. They did not come to fight dust on their boots. They did not come to fight air. I saw them through a broken view of the outside, figures moving in the glare, water arcing through the night, their helmets catching light. Above them, pieces of the building stood where the building should not have been, open to the sky. The sky itself looked wrong, not stormy, not clear, lit from below, blue-white in places, a color no night should have. No one outside the plant gates would understand that color, not yet. In Pripyat, people still slept. Some may have turned over in bed when the explosion came. Some may have woken, listened, then decided it was thunder or industry or some accident far away. The city trusted the plant because the plant had always been there. Families had built lives around its certainty. Schools, buses, cafeterias, balconies with laundry. A town of young workers and young children beside a machine everyone was told was modern and strong. I thought of my own kitchen. A cup left near the sink. A chair pushed badly under the table. A jacket hanging near the door. Objects waiting for a morning that had not yet been canceled. The phone rang again. Reports moved upward. Orders moved downward. The truth did not move at all. It stood in the room and waited for us to look at it. We kept looking away. More readings came. Radiation levels, too high for the instruments, too high for the words men wanted to use. The numbers should have changed every decision. Instead, the first response was to doubt the numbers, because numbers can be doubted quietly. A destroyed reactor cannot. I walked once to the corridor and stopped before I had gone far. Water covered the floor in a thin black shine. The walls were wet. A cable hung down like a dead snake. The air was full of dust. I heard footsteps somewhere ahead, but I could not tell if they were coming toward me or away. A piece of plaster fell. The sound made me flinch. Then came another sound. A phone ringing in a room behind me. Normal, urgent, absurd. The plant was broken open, and still the phones rang as if the world could be managed through lines and voices. I went back. There was work. There is always work. That is another mercy and another trap. Write this down. Call that room. Find that man. Check that system. Stand here. Do not leave. When the mind is given tasks, it does not have to hold the whole disaster at once. It can hold a switch, a clipboard, a door handle, a number. The night lengthened, but it did not become morning. Time inside the plant stopped behaving. Minutes stretched, then vanished. A man would leave, and I would think he had been gone for seconds. Then I would look at the clock and see that 20 minutes had passed, or a minute would feel long enough to age in. At some point, I realized I had not heard birds. That thought should not have mattered. It mattered. Outside, the fires burned. Inside, the instruments failed us by telling the truth too loudly. We finally received a reading from a stronger instrument. No one in the room wanted to say it first. The level was not a fire level, not a pipe level, not a bad night at work level. It was a number from another kind of world. A world where distance mattered, where minutes mattered, where cloth, concrete, and orders did less than men wished they did. The invisible thing had already left the building. It was on boots, on jackets, in dust, in smoke, moving with the wind, moving toward men who thought they were only tired, moving toward a city where children would wake and ask about the strange glow. There are moments when knowledge does not arrive like light. It arrives like weight. You do not feel brighter, you feel heavier. I looked at my hands. They looked the same. That was the terror. Nothing about them warned me. No stain, no cut, no flame. Only skin, only nails, only the hands of a man who had spent the night touching papers, switches, rails, doors, and perhaps the future of everyone outside. A supervisor was still saying the reactor was intact, not as loudly now, but still. The sentence had become smaller. Men stopped repeating it. That was how I knew belief had begun to fail. Not when someone argued, when no one helped the lie anymore. A report came back from outside. I did not hear every word. I did not need to. I saw the faces of the men who heard it. They looked toward the same wall, as if they could see through concrete, through smoke, through the broken building, into the place we had all refused to imagine. The core was open. The reactor was not contained. The machine at the center of our night had become part of the night itself. No one shouted then. The loud part had passed. Real dread is quieter. It sits down in the room. It waits. It makes men speak in shorter sentences. Do this, go there, call them, get masks. Where is he? How long? How high? The city outside still slept for a while. I cannot forgive that part. Not because I blame any single man in that room for every silence that followed. History likes clean guilt. Rooms like that do not. They are full of fear, rank, ignorance, habit, pressure, and orders that arrive wearing the face of necessity. But I remember thinking of Pripyat. I remember imagining a mother opening a window, a boy looking at the glow from a balcony, someone walking to the river, someone saying it was only a fire. Only. That word again. Only a fire. Only a test. Only a faulty meter. Only a small delay. Only until morning. Only until someone higher confirms it. Disaster is often built from the word only. At dawn, the plant looked unreal. The light should have helped. It did not. Daylight removed the mercy of shadow. Walls were torn open. Smoke rose from places that should have been sealed. Water shone on concrete. Men moved slowly, not because the danger had passed, but because they had begun to understand that speed could not outrun it. The air was full of dust. Dust on boots. Dust on hair. Dust on the rails. Dust on the papers. Dust on the city's future. I stood near a window and saw the sky pale above the reactor. For a moment, it almost looked peaceful. That was the cruelty of radiation. It did not need to look like itself. It could hide inside morning. People asked later when I first knew. Not suspected, not feared, knew. I have never been able to give one answer. Maybe it was when the dosimeter needle stopped at the top. Maybe when the man said graphite. Maybe when no one repeated that the core was intact. Maybe when I looked toward Pripyat and realized the city was still sleeping under a danger that had already entered the air. Or maybe I knew in the first silence after the explosion, before reports, before readings, before orders. A room full of trained men became quiet, not because there was nothing to do, because, for one breath, every man understood that the machine had done something outside the limits of our imagination. Years later, people would draw diagrams. They would name the mistakes. They would measure the release. They would argue about design, procedure, responsibility, and lies. They would point to charts and say the accident began here, then here, then here. I do not argue with charts, but charts do not remember the pencil on the floor. They do not remember tea cooling in a glass. They do not remember a man tapping a dosimeter as if truth were a stuck needle. They do not remember the way a normal phone can ring inside the end of a world. That is what I remember, not the whole disaster. No one can remember the whole disaster, only pieces. A red light, a broken window, a wet corridor, black blocks on the ground where black blocks should never be, the glow above the building, the sleeping city, and the silence after the sound. The first thing I learned that night was that danger does not always announce itself with fire. Sometimes it arrives as a number, sometimes as dust, sometimes as a word no one wants to repeat. Graphite, radiation, evacuation. Too late. History remembers Reactor 4. I remember the room where the needles climbed, and no one wanted to be the first to believe them.